Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And alright, let's talk about the newest album from Kanye West, Yay. I remember when it felt like a new Kanye West album was an event. I mean, hate him or love him, and there's ample room on both sides of that conversation. He was a good enough producer and occasionally a great artist to at least monopolize that conversation, and he took enough chances to at least generate some interesting music that was accessible to the mainstream that felt fiercely relevant to that larger cultural conversation. But it doesn't really feel like that with Ye, and Kanye really tried to make it feel like that with the overloaded spectacle of piling up album releases one after the other, with deadlines that seemed impossible and production that couldn't help but feel incredibly rushed. And as much as I really love Daytona by Pusha T, I knew deep down that was somewhat of a fluke, because Pusha T is a great rapper who only really needed that fat trimmed away to make a great album. Now with Kanye West putting out a 7-song record, the list of things that could go wrong seemed to stretch on for miles. Badly chosen features, incompetent rapping, sloppy vocal arrangements, inconsistent production, and that's before we got into some of the, let's call it provocative commentary that revealed a talented artist holds some painfully undercooked, ill-informed, or just flat-out stupid opinions that too many people in his fan base and around him have validated for far too long. It led to many people saying that Kanye West was canceled, but I knew that was never gonna last, so I just refused on principle to give his material more attention when I had other more interesting projects like Ghost and Father John Misty up first on the docket. But this is what the people wanted. This is what people were voting for on Patreon, so alright. What did we get out of Yay? Well, I will say this. If you're enamored with the cult of Kanye West, I'm talking about the personality, you were gonna praise this regardless of what I or anybody else is gonna say. And I think to some extent that's part of the problem, because Kanye West and those seeking to enable him, they know that too. A feedback loop of people convinced of Kanye West's genius and infatuated with his provocative personality that they can't really see the Ouroboros for the trees. And that's really what it feels like if you're looking in from the outside like I am, because instead of the transcendent and personal experience that Kanye promised with this, I hear what could have been a personal and compelling story stripped of the insight and reflection that is promised for something that's far smaller and far shallower. What many of us who haven't bought into the cult of Kanye West was suspected is true of his personality all along. This has been going back for years now, but Ye really cements that impression. And before we get into the review proper, I want to establish a few things, specifically surrounding Kanye West's claims that he has bipolar disorder. Brought up on Yikes, it's been evident in the massive contradictions screwed across his entire career. I'm inclined to believe him, so I will completely buy into it being a factor of how his thoughts are presented on this album. Keep in mind that Kanye is far from the first artist to explore mental disorders in hip-hop. From the Ghetto Boys to Eminem, from Cage to DMX, from Joe Budden to Sage Francis and B. Dolan, let's not rewrite history here to say that Kanye West is treading new ground here in terms of a lot of his content. And as such, I'm going to be treating Kanye West as a rational actor in creating this art. He's a 40-year-old multi-millionaire with a pretty extensive discography of material, and while the disorder might color his intentions and impulses, he still actually has to act upon them to make the art. Hell, Kanye himself describes his bipolar disorder as a superpower, so regardless of the mental hell it could be for some with a lot less privilege and enablers, if it's empowered Kanye in his art, I think it's important to put that in context. But that also means, as a rational actor in his work, he doesn't get a free pass when you start digging into the contradictions or bad choices made in his art. Again, you can understand his intentions without excusing a lot of the results here. And that means, yeah, we're starting with the content. And considering how bare bones so much of this production feels, it kind of makes sense to place Kanye West's words at the very center here, especially as he's deliberately trying to provoke a reaction from the audience, continuously prod at the limits of what people around him will excuse or tolerate, especially a lot of his immediate family. The opening song, I Thought About Killing You, might start off with the inherent contradiction of how he could kill someone he loves, but considering he loves himself way more than he loves this person, likely his wife, and he thinks about killing himself all the damn time, it's not that far afield, right? Of course, this sort of thought pattern utterly ignores the fact that inflicting harm on oneself is very different than hurting other people, and conflating them in the context of mental disorders is extraordinarily reckless to say the least. But outside of referencing how closely intertwined love and hate might be, Kanye West, he's a lot more interested in provoking the audience's reaction, prodding them a little bit closer to at least considering the same thoughts he has, or maybe even saying them aloud, trying to destigmatize them. Again, not new. Holding up the dark mirror to the audience is something Eminem did both in vivid fashion on the Marshall Mathers LP and Relapse. In the latter case, it's ripping away the possible glamour of those impulses to show the really ugly human truth of feeding into them. And to some extent, it seems like Kanye West is aware that there could be possible consequences to this, but here's where the narrative shifts. Because unlike Eminem's Hall of Mirrors that came most to fruition on Encore, or DMX's self-aware certainty of his eventual bleak end, or how B. Dolan's The Failure is far more grounded surrounding the very real-world consequences of mental torment, especially on the artistic process, Kanye doesn't really face serious repercussions. And there's a part of him that knows it. It's why in a song about murder-suicide, he mentions calling up the Muslims, or how a song later he expresses the most concern about possibly getting Me Too'd like Russell Simmons, or targeted by those who would seek to silence him, although if he's getting Me Too'd, you have to wonder what he could have done in the past, or how on All Mine, he seems to relish the scandal sparked up by fucking a long line of celebrities. And yet a song later, it's made clear that Kim Kardashian was never gonna leave him despite all of his TMZ statements and OD trolling, where Kanye West is intentionally looking to drive up some of that reaction. And here's the problem. There is a measure of truth to what Kanye West is implying here, because people who suffer from depression or bipolar disorder, they can bait or push against their loved ones in order to drive them away because of self-loathing or feelings of not being worthy, or even just to spur some sort of reaction. It's not an excuse for Kanye's behavior, but it is an explanation. But thanks to Kim's refusal to leave or confront him on this, perhaps out of genuine love, perhaps out of the truth that Kanye West is her greatest window into black culture, it becomes an excuse for him. It becomes the free pass for Kanye West to do and say whatever he wants and face no serious consequences, despite there being consequences down the line for other people. Why else is Ghost Town so focused on returning to that childlike experience with no responsibility? Put a hand on the stove and not bleed. It's also why Kanye West hits his most sobering moment on the closing track, Violent Crimes. Because in taking a page out of Nas and Jay-Z's books, he reflects upon his daughters growing up and encountering guys just like him. A fact that, he conveniently forgets when it's time to fantasize about nailing all those women who are not his wife on All Mine and Yikes, but that's all the more reflective on how Kanye only really values women when they directly touch his life, and sometimes even barely then. But the much larger, much more loaded asterisk that's attached to all of this album is that Kanye can only get away with any of this in the mainstream is because his wife has proven repeatedly willing to bail him out because of her vast wealth and the feedback loop that he has with his fan base that will excuse everything. The sort of self-aware, bigger picture observation that Kanye now seems incapable of making or commenting upon. After all, he doesn't take advice from people less successful than himself. So putting aside the dangerous enablement here, not helped by Kanye West using Wouldn't Leave to lionize this point of view for women in his outro, because it's not like Kanye West is gonna change anytime soon, or how in the larger context of art, more fans will now blindly accept that implication compared to the wild tweets, because look how quickly he got uncanceled here. There are a lot of ugly conflations with regards to mental health that Kanye West makes in this subtext that really don't apply in anything close to reality for everybody else. And what's really more disturbing is that it's clear he's thought through none of that implication. That's a real problem. But really, that's about the message. That's about the themes, the intentions. We now need to talk about the execution, and where I actually have some praise for some earlier Kanye records in comparison with this. I mean, say what you will about Yeezus, when Kanye was playing into negative stereotypes, he did so with the backdrop of some imposing and wild production. Say what you will about The Life of Pablo, and I did in my review, for as much as it leaned into similar provocative instincts, there was a feeling of instability that this could well be the breaking point in the slapdash mixing and the wild shifts in sound. But with Ye, the implication of zero consequences utterly kills any sense of greater tension to the album on songs like Yikes or I Thought of Killing You. And when you consider the back half of the latter track is punctuated with those pulsating drums and the screams, the fact that I felt no greater weight or impact or tension, that's a serious issue. Now, part of this is tied back to how Kanye West doesn't have the focus to stop the occasional awful line from coming through. Don't get your chipped tooth like Frito-Lay. I love your titties because they prove I can focus on two things at once. None none of us would be here without Come or the aforementioned Stove line, but the larger factor is that the production just doesn't really serve Kanye all that well where it could. Credit where it's due, I won't deny that Kanye West delivers some of his most consistent flows in some time across this project in terms of lyrical construction and delivery, but in comparison to Pusha T's more streamlined, single-minded focus, the much more scattered feel means the elements wind up clashing in really awkward ways. From the choppy auto-tune sample from Francis and the Lights behind the opening song, punctuated with these rattling whooshes that I could swear are from Super Smash Brothers, and they come back and yikes against the warping, curdled rumbles on the low end, and then there's the sharp, barren bass of All Mine that has some jagged bombast at the samples in the second verse, but we're stuck with Jeremiah's really husky hook. At least he doesn't sound like he's singing through a bad head cold like 070 Shake does on Ghost Town and Violent Crimes. Sorry folk, that outro did not win me over as much as it seemingly did everybody else, because I actually enjoyed the soul sample juxtaposed against the surging guitars a way more before the overblown percussion and the spacey effects cut in and swallowed her. And even then, I'd probably prefer that compared to the Young Thug impression that Party Next Door keeps trying. Hell, when you have Charlie Wilson teaming up with Kid Cudi and No Mistakes and actually sounding pretty damn good for a pretty great hook, you have to wonder why on earth Kanye West keeps putting on Party Next Door. But even on that song with Violent Crimes, it feels like Kanye West is not letting any groove materialize or letting good melodic elements build momentum. You have to wonder if this album had been given a little bit more space to really flesh out some of these sounds, it could have ended up working a lot better. And look, I get how that's now part of the appeal of Kanye these days. A whirl of clashing, lumpy elements hurled into a vaguely melodic void or against a sample for Kanye to bray over top of it. But the most pronounced feeling I get with this project is that it just feels rushed and undercooked thematically, lacking the greater forethought to consider the ideas or the implications that Kanye West espouses. A lot of manic flash and bombast, but a foundation that feels increasingly insubstantial with every listen I give it. At least on previous Kanye albums, I can find songs where the clashing elements built to a strong hook or a cool lyrical idea, but Ye is all the evidence in the world that he doesn't really have to deliver that, and he'll still be successful. People will still praise him just fine. And frankly, I don't feel like enabling that anymore when there's just not enough here to justify it. Extremely light 5 out of 10, recommended only to the fans and only tentatively there. For the good of everybody else, let's move on. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. You'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I really think I said too much about this album because really it's not worth as many words as I gave it, but again, I wanted to actually break down in detail why this record had no tension and no real impact for me. It didn't connect and I wanted it to, at least on some level. Hell, Pusha T's record was great, but this is not. But hey, if you want to buy it, links down there below. Got the poll up there. I'm curious where you guys all fall on this, because I think this album is dividing a fair number of people. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process and get the rest of the albums that dropped on June 1st up that schedule, the link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. More details right there. Want to see a schedule to my Instagram, link down there below. You have to wonder when and where albums will show up on said Instagram. Contribute to the Patreon, they will get there. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.